Welcome to Think eBooks. You are listening to a free excerpt from the ebook Rolex Watches by Leonard Lowe. If you like this ebook, please come and visit our website at www.thinkebooks.com. And please don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel. We will update our free content on a regular basis. Thank you. And now, have fun listening to Rolex Watches by Leonard Lowe. Rolex Watches, What Makes Rolex Special? By Leonard Lowe. Why Rolex? Simple, because they are beautiful. That, by the way, might be the simplest truth behind the outstanding success of Rolex as a brand. The product is simply great. They are technological pieces of art. Believe me, just follow me around a bit. A lot of people, when they think of Rolex, they have something like a gold watch in mind. A clunky, yellow, not too decent kind of jewelry that seems to appeal to drug dealers and rather responsible film and rock stars. And most of all, a Rolex in common sense is felt to be ridiculously expensive. Probably the most expensive watches you can buy. This image of some Rolex customers is not completely false, but at the core, the image of Rolex as a manufacturer of watches in this picture is completely wrong. Rolex is a very serious watchmaker who for a very long time in their history primarily were and are making technically superior tool watches, and these often are not made from gold but from steel, but they cost as much as if they were made from gold, so there is obviously more to them than meets the eye. A decent Rolex watch is not a shiny clunky thing with more optical appeal than substance, but completely the opposite. For example, Rolex dive watches were considered the most waterproof of all the dive watches around. That is, in 1953. Basically, the first Rolex Submariner in 1953 was the only diving watch that stayed completely dry on the inside while tested by the military, and they tested a lot of models and brands. Rolex diving watches aim at the professional diver who has every need in the world for a really good diving watch, because underwater, his life might depend on it, and even more so, if he is a military diver. This is not only more than 60-year-old cold coffee, but something that is called heritage and at the same time a standard and an expectation of customers. Rolex has to life up to every single day since, and they do this not by making clunky fashion pieces but by still making the most robust and reliable watches on the planet. What more misunderstandings are there? Rolex seems also be known to be the most renowned luxury watchmaker. Rolex watches are the mother of all luxury watches. Rolex even features the crown as their logo to represent their top standing. Unfortunately, all of this is also not true. Not only is Rolex not the most renowned luxury watchmaker, despite the crown in the logo, Rolex is just a little more than 100 years old, what makes them literally a new brand in the very traditional luxury watch market, where other brands are more than 200, some even nearly 300 years old. And Rolex did not inherit a top standing in this market or started out with one because of their nice logo with the crown. Rolex had to struggle for decades to get where they are now, at the top. Indeed, Rolex invented something that made them rise to the top of luxury watch market, without being the top-notch brand. They made very high-quality tool watches and drove the standards for them to a complete new level, and that way these watches became luxury tool watches and Rolex finally a luxury brand. And by the way, a lot of what makes Rolex tool watches luxurious is not bells and whistles but plainly necessary technology due to the demand for durability in even tough situations. The use of white gold on the dial and other parts, for example, prevents aging of these components. For example, the hour markers and the hands. A lot of Rolex design features are application driven, not design or luxury driven, and that makes Rolex more of a high-tech company than a luxury company at all. They are clearly in a hybrid position and, as often, this is what makes them so strong. That Rolex did not primarily intend to make luxury watches at all can be seen by the fact that in the 1950s and 1960s, when Rolex started their fame presenting all the up to the present time important tool watch lines as steel watches, steel was not at all considered to be the material a luxury watch could be made from at that time. A luxury watch had to be made from gold, period. That, by the way, did not change until the Holy Trinity. See the eBook luxury watches. Member Audiobook Piguet presented their provocative Royal Oak in the early 1970s, made from steel and not from gold like a real luxury watch. And as every watch back then before the invention of the quartz movement was a mechanical watch and the watches only differed in perfection and quality, Rolex was not much more than a high quality tool watch manufacturer. and still has been until the late 1990s, when Rolex more and more found out that they also could do real luxury watches at a larger scale than before. What now is a tool watch? Of course it is a watch that is made for a special purpose, like a diving watch, and for that reason has special abilities. All Rolex Oyster watches are tool watches in that sense. Of course not the ones made from massive gold. These are often more like celebrations of the original steel versions. There are several models for different applications in the Rolex model range. There for example is the Explorer and the Explorer II, made for rough environments. They are waterproof and shock resistant, and the law says the Explorer went to the top of Mount Everest with Edmund Hillary. The Explorer II additionally has GMT time, basically a 24-hour hand, meant to know if it is day or night if you are for example underground as a cave explorer. The original Explorer II can also be seen on a lot of photos on the wrist of Reinhold Messner, the famous mountaineer and adventurer. So are you a mountaineer or a deep-sea diver? You will find out that these tool watches and their special abilities are, on closer consideration, not only important for these very special applications, like climbing the Mount Everest, but for nearly every occasion you can wear a watch. Shock resistance is not only necessary if you are hit by a rock at 7,800 meters above sea level, it is also helpful if you hit the doorframe of your office door with your wrist. And the same applies to magnetic resistance and water resistance and precision and diving bezels and so on. Talking about diving, the Submariner, and its offspring the Sea Dweller, the Deep Sea and the Yacht Master are diving watches. They are professional grade waterproof above anything else. They have highly seawater resistant casings made from Rolex special steel, and they have bezels to check short time ranges of some dozen minutes to always know exactly since when you are underwater, and how much oxygen is left in your scuba tank. You better know that. And these Rolex diving watches were also just good enough for Sean Connery to hunt Dr. No and Goldfinger. But the timing bezel can also be used if you want to cook pasta. The mechanism is quite the same. You rotate the bezel to the time you put the pasta in the boiling water, and you can exactly and without effort see when they are ready. Very practical. You don't need a chronograph for your tasks in the kitchen, and not a GMT. Speaking of which, the GMT Master and GMT Master II are meant for people who change time zones a lot, like for example plane pilots or frequent business travelers. You don't want to adjust your watch every time you skip a time zone. What you want is a watch that runs on GMT world time, and you just rotate a bezel to adjust to the actual time zone you are currently in. But to be honest, the GMT Master really became famous for its design with the blue-red bezel. Pepsi, and that Thomas Magnum wore one chasing gangsters in Hawaii. Changing around daylight savings time twice a year is probably not a valid application for it. The Cosmograph Daytona is meant to find out how fast you are going. It is a chronograph, a stopwatch with a tachymeter scale that tells you your speed if you know the distance you traveled since you stated the chrono. You can eventually use a milestone on the road or something. Paul Newman made this one famous for some reason. The obvious reason why the Daytona is such an icon of watchmaking is this: it has a very reduced and very classy design, and for the first 10 years of this modern age Daytona design, since 1988, it was nearly not available at all. It was very much wanted and nearly not available, so it became a legend. And then there is the much overlooked Milgauss, a watch for people who work in power plants or scientific labs with a lot of strong magnetic fields. But who again does that? But even here it's the same game again. Today with all these electronic devices around, there are a lot of magnetic fields that can interfere with the subtle metal mechanics of a high precision watch. Because we did not consider precision yet, if you make a mechanical micro machine that oscillates 28.000 times every minute and is expected to just go wrong by a maximum of 2 seconds a day, every little nuisance isn't wanted. And so the anti-magnetic parts developed for the Milgauss finally made their way into all Rolex models and are today part of the perfection these watches offer if you want them to measure time. These basic tool watch types, the rugged ones, the waterproof divers, the GMTs, the chronographs and the anti-magnetic specialists today can be found again and again in the programs of nearly every serious watchmaker around the globe as well. But just seldom they reach the simplicity, the perfection and the timeless style of the Rolex originals. They are copied thousands of times, but the original one simply is only the Rolex version. and the others have their merits also. There is the Omega Seamaster diving watch that 007 used in the late 1990s, and the Omega Speedmaster that, probably, went to the moon and was used in a lot of space shuttle and ice missions. And there is the Blancpain 50 Fathoms that is the crown jewel of luxury diving watches and is still today available with radioactive luminescent markers that loom longer. No nonsense here. And there are the diving watches from the 1930s like those from Officine Panerai that are not so famous for being used as diving watches these days, but for being worn by nearly every Hollywood star around these days. So the tool watch is not a Rolex speciality, but Rolex did a lot of groundwork for these kind of watches and obviously is the crowned king of this genre. And I personally find that actually a relief that Rolex is the top brand of a genre that really requires innovation and hard work, know-how and technology, real skills and not just exuberant luxury and ridiculously expensive materials. Tool watches are an honest genre, a tough one too. Not just the most expensive watch in the world or some BS like that. Rolex really deserves its position in the watch market, because they worked really hard for nearly a century, that is 100 years, and stacked innovation on innovation to get there, where they are today, and why you probably read this ebook. And today a Rolex watch is just a more than perfect timepiece with an outstanding quality at a reasonable price. Yes, reasonable price. This might sound a bit odd, because you can pick up a good quartz watch for $100 everywhere. Why then should $10,000 be a reasonable price for a watch that does the same thing? Showing time. Well, this is another story we discuss in more detail in the available ebook Luxury Watches. This is just the entry part of our short ebook about the Rolex world. The ebook provides you with a lot of purchase relevant background information on the most important Rolex models. With this ebook you will be able to select the watch you want and purchase it with ease. You will have a quick overview of the Rolex models and understand why they are there and why some models are considered more important and valuable than others. This is not a Rolex sales catalog. In contrary to such an approach, we try to cover all the information that is not given on official websites but nevertheless should make it much clearer how the Rolex models are connected to each other and what might be the right one for your wrist. If you found this information useful, please consider buying the whole ebook that is available on all the major ebook stores. Just look for Leonard Lowe and Rolex Watches or just click on the link in the description. Unfortunately, this have already been 3,000 words from the ebook Rolex Watches by Leonard Lowe. But don't worry, there is a lot more to discover in the ebook itself. If you like our ebooks, please come and visit our website at www.thinkebooks.com. And please don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel. We will update our free content on a regular basis.